In November of 2022, we held our third annual Seeds Philly event at Cherry Street Pier. We of the Seeds director Tyler Nagoyo sat down to speak with leaders in the Indigenous food sovereignty movement, Dawn Spears and Cassius Spears of Ashawalk Farm, and Chef Sherry Pocknett of Sly Fox Den 2 Restaurant, both located in Rhode Island. Here now is part 2 of our discussion in progress. Enjoy.
I'd like to ask Dawn about localizing. How do you create a space and how do you share knowledge enough where you can localize your food systems and have people understand that it is so important to do that? And tag on to that question, you have this incredible vision. I know for a long time we've talked about this, and I mentioned the project we're working on together, these learning tools, but incorporating your art, incorporating the art of other artists to create these learning tools to share. Can you share a little bit about that and then talk about how that knowledge can affect a community? You have the farm stand, you want to put out these learning tools. There's just so many layers to this in your vision that will help what Cassius and Sherry is talking about, that ultimately that education that ultimately affects all of us. It's not just about the Indigenous peoples.
Well, one first thought came to mind was we planted Narragansett Flint corn. We have a farm that is located on Main Street in Ashaway, which is a very small village in the town of Hopkinton. And I feel like we kind of came in under the radar with this property. It was kind of just sitting there and not really active. And so we've been building it up. I feel like there's some pictures that you'll see. So we have some high tunnels on there. But the first year that we were growing and we planted the whole front field, we had Narragansett Flint corn growing. So we had opened the stand and I kept having people stop because they're like, well, when is the corn going to be ready? And I had to tell them, actually, that corn is not sweet corn and it's not for eating. We actually grew that for our tribal community, and it's more as a medicine rather than as a food, which I get really bewildered looks. But I feel like in some ways, we're doing that and we are educating our local community. Now, we grew Narragansett Flint corn at our tribal farm in 2018, and that was very significant for us because at that point we were using it as medicine that year to build community, to bring our community back because we were having a lot of turmoil within our community. So the process of growing the corn, watching it grow, it grew to be like 15 feet tall. You would stand by it and feel this hum kind of come off of it, this energy that was overwhelming. When we had a food summit in 2018, and some of our elders from the tribe came, and I told the ladies, please just go over and stand by that corn and tell me, just stand by it and just close your eyes and feel for a minute. And they came back to me and there was tears down their faces. So they could feel that energy, and it was like looking back and seeing your ancestors, seeing a relative, seeing family growing. And that to me is so important, to be able to experience that side of growing food, that we are connected to it, the harvesting of it, the singing the songs, the community coming together. There should be some pictures that come up where you'll see there's all different age groups out there. My 100-year-old grandmother was still alive at that point, and she was there, and she was just overwhelmed, to see so many of us in this space harvesting that corn, braiding it, and so things like that is what will keep me doing what I'm doing. And I don't know how I went from being an artist to a food producer, but I think it was always there, and it just needed to come forth, because what has happened now is growing the food, whether it's the corn, strawberries, the tomatoes, all of it has now come to a point where I really feel it's important to document it, take these pictures, create teaching tools. So for the classes and the workshops that we were giving earlier, seed saving, starting your plants, whatever the topic was, now I want to have even more information to enhance that. And so I feel like we've gone to a next level with this project that we're talking about. And I just think it's really important. And I don't know if I've answered the question or if I've digressed.
And that goes right into talking about Sherry's new venture or that you've been working on for a couple of years. So Sherry,
Charlene,
Yeah.
just one thing about what Dawn was talking about here, when she mentioned that the corn was grown as a medicine, what she means is that you plant the corn, and when you harvest the corn, you actually give that corn away to the community. And the idea behind that is that the following spring, they come back with that corn and we replant it. So as your cornfields grow, your community involvement grows as well.
thank you for that clarification or expansion. Sherry mentioned that she has a restaurant. It's in Charleston. But Sherry is, as you can see, with Time Magazine, Anthony Bourdain, Padma Lakshmi, just globally known, and catering and all these just beautiful things. And when you have Sherry's food, it's just an experience like no other. It's just so grounding, and it's just like the essence, and it's just quiet sometimes when you eat her food, because you're just like, wow, this is what life is, right? And all of her love and all of the just the ingredients that go into it, it makes such a difference. Sherry is working on expanding, so I would love for you to talk about the oyster farm and the museum.
Sure.
And this project that really needs a lot of support because it's important for the world that it gets off the ground.
So I'm a caterer. So in 2019, I was looking for a place just for catering, for licensing, because I was doing it out of my house. And I was getting smashed with jobs, and someone had called the assessor's office, and the town called me and said, you're catering out of your house, you can't do it. So I'm looking for this place, and I drive by this restaurant, this old bar, and I said, you know, if that were to become available, I would love to get that. I have two daughters, Cheyenne and Jade. Jade's 33, Shy's 29, and they're both in the catering business with me as partners. So I went by this restaurant, this bar, and said, man, if that was available. The next day, it became available. It's right on the bay. On the east side, there's a river with a herring that I was talking about, but they call them buckies in Connecticut. I had worked at Foxwoods Casino's museum, and I worked in a restaurant there for about 5 years. And then I just wanted to get out and do my own thing, so I found this amazing spot. Took me 6 months to find the money to buy it. We finally bought it February 1st, 2019. We were hustling to make it a restaurant because it was a bar. It just had a small bar kitchen in it, and it has a bay with a tide. So it's brackish water. It's on 3.5 acres of land. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of property. You can do so many things with it. So we grabbed it. We got it. We're working our butts off in 2019 till 2020 came. We were ready to open for spring 2020, and then the pandemic hit. I can remember the day, March 9th, everybody called me, and I had about 33 catering gigs up and down East Coast. And everybody canceled. So we still had to pay the mortgage. We still have to, and you know, they shut the world down. So that whole year, by the Thanksgiving time, I think, I was at a ceremony over in Narragansett territory, and I came across this little teeny restaurant. It's 30-seat restaurant. There was a sign on the door that said for rent. Called the landlord, and we ended up with a lease. We were supposed to open in January 1st, 2021. I said, whoa, if I can just get this, I'll be able to create revenue for the other place. So we got it. We're there. It's called Sly Fox Den 2, TOO, meaning also. We sell Indigenous fare. We sell breakfast and lunch. We sell venison, smoked fish. We have quail. We have duck. We have rabbit, especially now, it's that season for that comfort food. But getting back about the dream restaurant in Connecticut that we bought in 2019 because we want a museum, a living museum. We're going to put a oyster farm there. We're getting ready to start that. And farm to table garden, there's 2.5 acres across the street. So really, to put a Three Sisters garden, a living museum with a Nashwitu. Nashwitu means house with two fires, like a wigwam with live interpreters that's going to interpret the history of the 16, 17, 1800 Eastern coastal people, the way we lived, how we foraged for food, you know, the bounty of the season. So we're still running with it. We're still raising money for it. And hopefully we'll be open in the spring.
How can people donate?
So if you want to check us out, go to Sly Fox Den, SLYFOXDEN, and you can see the restaurant and you can see the progress that we're doing with it. You can see the menu. It has links to the other restaurant that's open right now. We have a GoFundMe there, and it's been really an amazing experience, a learning experience. I think that Creator gave me the small little restaurant because it needed me to know how much work this big restaurant's going to be. So, you know, so there we can do burnout canoe demonstrations. We can have an outside kitchen. We can do school class trips. I got so many ideas, it's crazy.
Thank you for sharing that. There's so much vision up on this stage. It's wonderful. It's the thing where you just want everything to happen now. But we're getting there, right? I mean,
Yes.
huge strides have been made. It's absolutely worth it, I'll tell you, to get in the car and make a trip. And if that's your whole 2-day vacation, 3-day vacation centers around going to Sly Fox Den 2, it is so worth it. Dawn and Cassius, can you share more about policy changes and the work that you've been doing with other food organizations to try to push change?
Yeah, so actually, Dawn and I wear a lot of hats. And another important one is a tribal council that we sit on that's divided up into three areas. One is east of the Mississippi, and then the Midwest, and then also the Western Coast. So we have a council from each one of those sections. And the reason why we have three different ones is because the geographical area is so different that we're actually trying to make sure we're inclusive of everyone across the nation. So the East Coast is so diverse in the landscape. What would benefit us there wouldn't most likely help folks in the desert. We actually have a meeting coming up in Las Vegas to meet with some of our partners, and one of them is NRCS, it's the Department of USDA, Natural Resource Conservation Services, and we're talking to them about putting language into the Farm Bill that will benefit tribal people across the nation, and things like, for example, cover crops. Barley and wheat as a cover crop, or different things that has been used. It's not really a strong use for tribal people, when we could use something like the Three Sisters corn, bean, and squash that would actually build the soil up. So to actually get that to be included on the list of possible cover crops to use is big throughout Indian country, and it helps us engage more into some of the programs and funding opportunities that these organizations all have. And they've been very receptive to hearing more about what would help us. Cultural plantings, for example. So to be able to plant some of our cultural plants and use them as well for a number of different reasons. So they set up practices that will help migrating birds and things that also will work from these native species. So these are just some of the examples that we try to do. But at the end of the day, what's really important is that this domino effect that it's having across other organizations to actually step up and say, what can we do to help as well? How can we learn more about how you value the natural resources, how you value Mother Earth? And I think that's so important. So it's really a positive thing.
So I come from just a little different angle. He's very much working on the national level and working with policy. I have kind of got myself into a few different networks locally. One, I just, in the past year, got on the town of Hopkinton's Conservation Commission. So that has been very interesting for me to get involved in a town committee. I don't know, I've always lived there. I lived there for almost 40 years now, and I never even considered that. So I like having an opportunity to share, obviously, Narragansett perspective at that table. But I've also been working on a relationship with Yukon and again, giving Indigenous perspective on some of the food programs that they have. It's through Yukon for the Connecticut school system, and it's bringing kind of healthy eating to the students. And I think that's K through 5. And so I'm literally just starting that in the last 2 weeks. But Cassius and I have been working with another local farm in Connecticut that has an educational program. And, I like all of this because it ties into what I already like to do, but we get to now have influence on the message that's being shared to the students out in the world, so that's always good. So that one I think was focused on 5th graders. And then the other thing that I just recently did this year, the Narragansett Tribes Education Director reached out to me and asked me to sit on the URI, University of Rhode Island's Honors Colloquium Planning Committee and bring, again, Indigenous perspective to that. So for this past year, I got to help bring in Sean Sherman, the sous chef, to the students at URI, and we brought Winona LeDuc in to also speak. So I feel like, again, these are things that probably wouldn't have happened without, us having that input. So they're little baby steps. And one thing that I have really been pushing is that we eat food seasonally, and we stop going into the supermarket and thinking that we can get everything whenever we want. I think for us to have a healthy mind and body, we need to eat food the way we have been raised traditionally, is we eat what's available seasonally and know that. And I don't think that your average student knows because they just think they can get everything all the time.
To add to that really quickly, we're going to take the 6-acre farm and we're going to use it as a template to show that you can build a healthy ecosystem on this farm using traditional knowledge and the technology of today between solar power pumps and building healthy soil and the importance of growing, food that's, like Dawn was saying, that is kind of traditionally had been grown for thousands of years in a location that they were nurtured in. So it's very important to understand that these plants that we're talking about and animals we work with as well are our relatives. They're related to us. They've been here with us this whole time. And so this home that we're building is also their home as well. And we kind of work in that kind of harmony.
Thank you, Cassius, Dawn, and Sherry. We have about 8 minutes, so I was just wondering if anybody in the audience has any questions, and I'll come over with the mic.
I was wondering about, for the farm, in growing, well, this might apply to you too, Sherry, in growing Indigenous varieties, what have been your best ways to source seeds, preserve seeds? If you could just talk a little bit about seed access.
That's a very good question. I have been seed saving for a long time, so I do have a ridiculous amount of seeds. It's really bad. It's almost like an obsession. I've become a seed hoarder. So what happens, I think, when we go to these food summits, there's always this little opportunity for you to bring seeds and share them. It's kind of my favorite part of, getting together. And so that's one way, is that we pass, from community to community, but also that we have been keeping seeds for a long time. Obviously, I do still shop like everyone else, but I do like to get heritage and heirloom varieties. So I don't know, you might have a better answer.
So it's very important to save seeds. But another thing is sometimes seeds are discovered at archaeological sites and they don't have the ability to germinate. But what we do is we diagnose that DNA and we can actually see how far our traditional seeds have drifted from hundreds of years ago. And so it helps us, again, the science is just amazing on how we can use this knowledge to continue keeping these things that are value to us in our community and keep them alive. We usually say that there's a lot of tribes throughout the nation and every one of us holds a bit of information, and when we come together we share that information and just makes us all stronger as a unit. So using the technology of today to be able to bring us closer is so important to us.
I do save seeds though, especially with the tomatoes. When I have a variety that I really like, I make sure I save it. And I am particular about which ones I save too. So you do get obsessed.
I get my seeds. No, I don't save seeds. I don't have a green thumb, but I have like herbs and stuff like that, that I have a little herb garden. I'm a wannabe gardener. I always loved to garden. I did it a lot with my grandmother. My father had a potato garden, so we had to sort those potatoes. It was probably from here to that door, and it wasn't fun, so I'm lost that, and I can stick to cooking.
We have stories around seed saving as well. You know, you nurture the seed, you take care of the seed, you take care of the plant like it's a baby, and eventually that plant will take care of you. So it's kind of, again, that full circle of kind of thinking a holistic view of the importance of these young seeds.
We have time for one more question. Yeah.
It's a question for Cheryl. You say you serve deer.
Yes.
I don't know how it is in your state, but I believe in Pennsylvania, if you hunt wild deer, you cannot commercialize it. Do you have to buy it from farm, or are you able to buy wild deer?
We do, because it has to be USDA, it has to be stamped, so we do source it from Pennsylvania, is actually where we get it from.
And I'll add to that too. We have meat processing plants now, and we have indigenous people in the nation that are getting USDA certified. So where we actually can certify our own meat, and we can also process that. So again, it's about that food security and that control of your food. So what you mentioned is another kind of thing that pulls you away
Right.
from what traditionally is our food.
Right. I haven't skun a deer for a long time, probably 10 years, so my son-in-law went and, I said, I want a doe, so he went and got me a doe because they're easier to clean for me. So I sent her a video of me cleaning a deer a couple days ago. I still got it. A little rusty, but I still got it. But the idea was to show my daughter and my granddaughter, and they were into it. They were really into it, and just making sure that we share these knowledges with our children and our grandchildren, and, you know, for the next 7 generations, we had to make sure we know our life ways, the old way, in order to take care of the land.
And life is the most precious gift that the Creator gave all of us. So anytime that we take a life, and the way that we process our food is very spiritual to us in how we do it, because the understanding of the connectivity of us in the animals and also in the plant world.
They basically are giving their life for us, so we absolutely have to give thanks for that, for us to exist.
Hi, I have a question. I recently watched a documentary, Sacred Cow, and the importance of eating grass-fed beef, respecting your animal. You see a lot of love that these farmers have for their cattle and respecting the land. And I was wondering your thoughts on the importance of that.
Well, you know, the world is changing, as I mentioned when I first started, and you'll notice that there's a lot of farmers out there that are taking a second look at how they have been doing things for years. I went to this organization called Noble Research Institute that was leading cutting edge on cow-calf operation. And basically, they turned their whole ship around, and they retitled a lot of their employees in there because they said, what we have been doing is wrong, and we got to stop this. Now, there was a lot of angry farmers because they was following their notes to a T, and now they're going to have to stop and rechange the way they think, and it's just, you know, it's a lot. But to answer your question, a farmer kind of likes to solve problems and puzzles, you know, and he's constantly looking for answers. So when he sees something that's not working or doesn't seem right, eventually they switch up their techniques. And I think that's what's going on in the world today with the information that's out there.
Thank you. So we're wrapping up, but I'd like to know if Sherry, Dawn, or Cassius have any final thoughts.
My final thought is, I was driving in last night and I was going through Central Park. And I was like, you know what? Central Park has sassafras. I bet you people don't even know about sassafras in New York, that you could harvest it from Central Park. You can harvest sassafras any time of the year, but know about what you're putting on your grass. Are you putting fertilizer so it can be green? Instead of putting that fertilizer on that grass, throw some seeds in there. You can get them from Dawn.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm a anti-lawn person because I don't understand what the point is. I hate to mow grass. I'm not mowing grass, so I'm advocating that people don't have grass and that they plant something that will help save our bees. And, you know, pollinators is what we need. So that's one thing. Second thing is, you know, there's all these trends with agriculture and like regenerative, but all these words that keep coming up. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, This is what we already do and have been doing. You're just giving it a new name. So you just need to go back to the way it was, or come talk to us and we'll show you how to do it, really. It's not something new. It's just exactly how we function and how we live, and yeah.
And I just want to say, a lot of times, we're not telling people what to do. We're just asking them to remember the way it was. And I want to say that we have grandchildren and children of our own. And Dawn and I came from Rhode Island, and Chevy's all the way from Mass. And there's sacrifices to make to be here. In some of the work that we do, there's a lot of sacrifice. But I also want to give you thanks for taking the time out of your life to be here and to listen and to make those sacrifices to want to know what's going on in Indian country. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here.
From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast is produced by Michelle St. John with music by Zachariah Julian and original logo art by Jason Weesaw. This podcast is funded in part by Independence Public Media Foundation.